Welcome back to Life Purpose using astrology as your guide. Edgar Cayce gave about 14,000 readings during his lifetime, and about 2,000 of those readings were life readings that contained astrological information. The Cayce philosophy presents a much broader and more cosmic view of astrology than is contained in traditional astrology books. This is a reading, one of the many readings that Cayce gave on astrology. Here he says, in astrological forces then, will has changed and may change any astrological, chronological, hereditary, or environmental influence. That is a very strong statement. So, in this session, you will read an article online about Cayce's approach to astrology. And as you proceed through this course of study, keep in mind that the Cayce readings emphasize the importance of and the use of the will when working with astrology. As you work through the worksheets, you'll see that you have many options for expressing and manifesting the symbols in your horoscope, and this is where you can use your will to make better and more constructive choices. In session 2, which is this session, we're going to be taking a look at Chiron. Chiron is a comet-like planetoid. At least that's what they're calling it at the moment, discovered in 1977, and its orbit moves between the planets Saturn and Uranus. It goes back and forth, and in some ways it symbolizes a messenger between the solar system that was known to ancient people, which went all the way out to Saturn, but not beyond that. Sometimes those are called the personal planets. And between those planets and the newer discovered planets, which are now called collective planets, the planets Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Chiron, his grandparents were Uranus, which was Father Sky, and Gaia, which was Mother Earth. And his parents were Kronos, Saturn in astrology, and he was born of an illicit union between Kronos, who took the form of a horse and had an affair with a sea nymph. Therefore, Chiron is half animal and half human. He is a centaur, what was called a centaur. Now, most of the centaurs were a very rowdy bunch. They were rapists and plunderers, but Chiron is very different and shows the more constructive use of that energy in his mastery of so many skills. Chiron is sometimes considered the first astrologer. He was a great astrologer, teacher. He taught and initiated healers and warriors and magicians. He was skilled at hunting and medicine, music, gymnastics, warfare, and astrology. He was the founder of the Asclepion, which was the ancient healing temple, and he was the teacher of Achilles and Orpheus, Hercules, Jason, and many other ancient heroes and warriors. There are a number of different stories and variations about his death. One of the stories is that he picked up one of the poisoned arrows of Hercules and dropped it on his foot and poisoned himself. Another one is that he was shot by Hercules accidentally. This was the poison that was on the arrows is a poison that he had actually taught Hercules to make. So it is kind of considered in a roundabout way a self-inflicted wound. Now, he was immortal, and so he could not die, but he was in great agony with this poison in his system, and yet he was unable to die. Meanwhile, back at the mountains, Zeus had chained Prometheus to the mountain because he stole fire, so that the human race might progress, might live. And Prometheus was chained to the mountain, and a vulture would come every night and eat his liver, and then it grew back in the daytime, and then at night the vulture would come again. So it was just a horrible life to live, if you could call it that. And Chiron decided to give up his immortality, and he descended into Hades, which is Pluto's realm, in order to free Prometheus. And when he did that, he was able to, Zeus let Prometheus go, and so thus Chiron actually died so that humanity might live. Chiron in astrology indicates a kind of initiatory process that we each need to go through in order to find our life mission. Ideally, during this initiation, the misshapen parts of ourself are what chooses to die, so that this initiatory process can then help to reorder our priorities, relinquish what's no longer appropriate or authentic, and liberate our unlived life, the life that we need to live but is so far unlived. So Chiron taught his secrets to Asclepius, the divine healer, but in modern astrology he represents the deep wounds that we've brought into this life to be healed. And that healing enables us then to be of service to others, to heal others. This is the symbol for Chiron in the horoscope. It looks like a little K and has a little circle down at the bottom. Here are a couple of quotes about the archetype of the wounded healer, and this is what Chiron is considered in the horoscope, the archetype of the wounded healer. This first one is by Karenyi, who was a colleague of Jung's, and he is referring to the wounded healer psychologically as the capacity to be at home in the darkness of suffering, and there to find germs of light and recovery with which, as though by enchantment, to bring forth Asclepius, the sun-like healer. And then the second quote is by Paul Levy. The archetype of the wounded healer reveals to us that it is only by being willing to face, consciously, experience, and go through our wound do we receive its blessing. Now here is Edgar Cayce's chart again. We saw that in the last session. Now we're going to take a look at his Chiron. And his Chiron is in the 9th house, so if you go up to the 9th house, you will see Cayce has 3 bodies there. The moon, you'll recognize the little crescent moon symbol. The other symbol is Neptune. You remember Neptune's trident, that's the symbol for Neptune. And then Chiron, and Chiron in this chart is in red. I don't know what color, if any color, it will be in your chart. His Chiron is in Aries. So again, we have to look at what does Chiron in Aries mean, and then what does Chiron in the 9th house mean. Those are 2 different things. Aries has to do with our self-esteem. This is a quote from one of the websites that you will be taking a look at for your own Chiron. Aries is the sign of selfhood. I was saying self-esteem. And with Chiron here, the sense of self may be weakened. So we're kind of looking at the possibility of a wound regarding self-esteem. And I think that anyone who knows Edgar Cayce's life knows that certainly in the early part of his life he had to struggle with self-esteem. The 9th house has to do, that was the archetype that we looked at in the first session with Jupiter, Sagittarius, and the ninth house. So it has to do with our worldview, it has to do with religion, philosophy, and here, with Chiron in the ninth, there is the possibility of some type of crisis that would have to do with spiritual teachings. And I think, again, if you know about Casey's life, you know that he certainly had a struggle with spiritual teachings. His readings were coming forward with a philosophy and a worldview that was so different from his own worldview. So you can begin to see the themes here with regard to his wounding. But again, there's a positive way to use these energies, and so what we're looking at here is the possibility of struggling with matters of faith, but also symbolizing the wish to rededicate the spiritual life in some way. And I think that we could probably say that about Casey, that he certainly did rededicate his spiritual life into a different path during his lifetime. Now, this is an Edgar Casey quote on our wounds or our failures. He says, "Be not overcome by disappointments or failures, but rather use each failure as a stepping stone for making the corrections in the endeavor." So I think this applies to Chiron and where Chiron is located in your birth chart. It is an area where you can turn a feeling of failure possibly, or a feeling of wounding, into a stepping stone for your life. And also this can indicate a part of your life mission is working on this particular area of your life. This is a quote by Fritz Perls. He says, "You never overcome anything by resisting it. You can only overcome anything by going deeper into it." And I think this is so true with the area and the wound that is symbolized by Chiron. Okay, let's see what you can do with your Chiron.